Let's bring in David Gazard and Eamon Fitzpatrick. David, the Prime Minister getting a fair bit of praise here for getting this done finally and getting Assange home. Do you think he deserves that for the diplomatic efforts made over the last couple of years?
I think there's cross currents in this that have been interesting to watch. No one has a problem with, his obligations and rights as an Australian, getting a fair trial in Australia and being able to be represented by Australian officials and so on and so forth. But of course, as you touched on and Cameron's touched on, a controversial figure because depending on which way you look at this, he compromised the security of Australians in the first place by his own hand. He broke his own contractual obligations to security forces and released information that was, depending on your view, and it happens to be my view, that was against the national interest, something that he'd signed up for, and potentially put Australians' lives at risk. Compounding that were other allegations of sexual assault, where he was facing other charges. But the one thing that comes out of this, to my mind, I'd be interested on Eamon's view. I've got a feeling he'd agree with me on this. If you are working in those roles, you cannot afford to break the law and release information on a whim. And anyone else considering doing this to our defence forces and our security forces needs to think again, in the knowledge that he was facing 174 years in jail if all the charges were pursued and were successful.
Eamon, he is a hero to many, though, in terms of free media and free speech, and as David Gazard said there, seen as a villain by many as well. But by the end of it all, 14 years on, even those that thought he might have done something badly against the United States' interests, David says against Australia's interests, that he had served his time regardless.
Yeah, and look, it's a tough question. I mean, we are former journos as well, so, and I think as a journalist, free speech, your obligation to maintaining free speech and transparency is critical. We criticise other states for not upholding that. Yeah. So it is a tough question. I think my own view has definitely softened as the years have gone by. I think a lot of people, because there is a huge responsibility when you do something like that and you make a call on it, but it dragged on way too long. It dragged on far too long. And I think the people who supplied him that information, well, what happened to them? And I found that...
Well, pardoned, Chelsea Manning.
There you go.
And that's Obama.
You got it, and that's my point, which was, I don't understand why it was allowed to hang for so long over him. I think, too, it's one of the times when you look...
What about the story, though? We get those pictures from Saipan in Mariana Islands, and this story is unbelievable, isn't it? I said it yesterday to colleagues on air, if you went to a film producer in Hollywood and gave them this, they'd laugh you out. They'd laugh you out of the room.
Except from today, they'll be running around trying to sign up the rights. So 14 years, I don't know. Well, I think he's in for a bit of a payday. Yeah. Of course, that's not why he did it, but you're absolutely right. That those scenes are remarkable. Kevin Rudd and his former ministerial colleague Stephen Smith side by side with him. I think what this actually does say, this has been a good day, because you look at actually when a parliament works, when a multi-party system works, when the two-party system works, you get agreement on the things that matter. Free speech matters to us. Yeah. We say that a lot to people around this region particularly. We need to uphold it too.
I've got to say, it's rare that you see a media event where Matt Canavan speaks and then a Green Senator, Peter Whish-Wilson, speaks, but that's what we've been seeing. Andrew Wilkie's held this news conference across the political divide from the far left to the far right. They were of the view that enough was enough, I guess, in some respects. Of another view, very much supportive of what he did.
Absolutely.
They thought his incarceration was wrong from the get-go.
That is the way that we roll in Australia, isn't it? Yeah. We support free speech. We support freedom of religion. We support freedom of association. So those are important principles at the end of the day. For Julian Assange to take himself off to the Ecuadorian embassy and put himself into exile there, to be seeking to always avoid extradition to other countries that were going to charge him, well, that is on him. But at the end of the day, Australia looks after Australians and gives them the rights to which they deserve. And it's good to see different sides of the spectrum agreeing to support and enshrine those rights.
Yeah, and at the time he made that call, that was a very different time. Let's not forget all those years ago, where he would have been definitely worried about just being sucked up somewhere into the US judicial system never to be seen again. I mean, that would have been a legitimate fear at that time.
At that time, that the momentum shifted.
Yeah.
It's certainly shifted in Australia in recent times with that delegation that went to Washington from cross-party, a delegation including Barnaby Joyce, among others, who went there to lobby. And again, that was a very broad range of individuals who went there on Assange's behalf. But now, the end of the episode, tonight he gets back to Canberra. I asked Mike Pizzullo, the former Home Affairs Secretary, should there be a senior presence upon his arrival? And he sort of scoffed at the idea. He said, why would they? He's not a hero. He's not a visiting statesman. Why would the Prime Minister or Foreign Minister show up to welcome him?
Because we see ourselves as the upholders of a free society. Free speech is fundamental to that. And I think for all the reasons we've just talked through, I think that is...
So you wouldn't be surprised if some leadership if the Prime Minister or Foreign Minister were there?
Well, the fact he's got the ambassador with him and the High Commissioner, number one. But I think at some point, surely you'd expect once he at least meets his father again, which good on him, you would like to think, given the amount of cross-parliamentary support this has had, that there'll be people there to greet him, because it is about sending a signal that we do believe in free speech, ultimately. That's who we are.
I wouldn't do it if I was the Prime Minister. I wouldn't do it if I was a senior minister. Let's not forget at the bottom of this, there is a political play that's going on here where Labor are doing deals with the Greens for preferences. You don't need to show up to lock that in. That's been done. And I would feel very uncomfortable if I was Anthony Albanese with a guy who has leaked state secrets and still has a cloud over him over certain allegations that go to sexual assault. So I would not.
Would you be more comfortable if, say, it was a cross-party delegation, say Andrew Wilkie, maybe one of the independents, the Greens, and maybe one of the backbench Labor figures?
There'll be people that will show up that are looking to maximise their own publicity with this, that have argued his case for years and years, no doubt. But I would not be going if I was a senior cabinet minister or if I was the Prime Minister.
David Gazard, Eamon Fitzpatrick, gentlemen, it has been a big day. Thank you both. We'll talk to you soon.